My name is Ranger Thomas Hale, badge FEN 4721, stationed at Great Smoky Mountains National Park, Tennessee District. I've worked the ridgeline routes between Clingman's Dome and Deep Creek for just over 12 years. Long enough to know that the forest has its own calendar. Fog season, bear season, tourist season, and that fourth one nobody names out loud, when the woods go too quiet and even the wind seems to listen. But this isn't about that season, not yet. This starts in late May, a week after the first thunderheads had rolled through. The ground was still slick, the moss electric green, the air swollen with that wet, metallic scent you get right before summer. The Smokies draw all kinds. Families with screaming kids, retirees who think hiking means walking from the car to the overlook, and sometimes people who don't seem to belong anywhere at all. My job that week was ordinary: clear a few block trails, check a bear can line, make sure the storm hadn't washed out the footbridge near Forney Creek. I left the station just after sunrise, radio clipped, pack slung, thermos of coffee in hand. Everything felt routine enough that I didn't notice the stillness until much later. That morning I met Evelyn Pierce, a seasonal hire from North Carolina. She was new, one of those sharp-eyed recruits who still believed procedures could explain anything. We took the first mile of the trail in silence, listening to cicadas warming up and the creek pushing at the banks. Evelyn walked ahead, ponytail swinging, asking occasional checklist questions. I answered by habit. Trail signage. Still legible. Any fallen debris. Just limbs. Campfire remnants. Not yet. It felt like reading from a manual, comforting in its dullness. By noon, clouds had begun to gather again over the ridge. Evelyn suggested turning back, but I wanted to reach the old Russell Field shelter. A stone structure hikers used decades ago, before new regulations closed it. We use it now to store emergency supplies, blankets, flare kits, spare radios. Nothing fancy, but enough to help if someone gets lost. We reached the shelter around 2. The place sat crooked in a dip of land, roof sagging, doorway half swallowed by vines. I remember noticing how the air temperature dropped a good 10 degrees as soon as we stepped inside. Moisture clung to the walls. Everything smelled of mildew and thyme. I logged our arrival, checked the inventory, and found the same odd thing I'd seen the last 2 visits. One of the flares missing from the box, no note left. Normally that meant another ranger had borrowed it, but our logbook didn't mention it. Evelyn pointed it out before I could. Maybe someone just forgot to mark it, she said. Maybe, I answered, but the handwriting on the last line, the one supposedly mine from April, looked heavier, as if pressed into the page hard enough to tear slightly, and it wasn't my pen. Still, I closed the book, told her not to worry, and we started back before the rain broke. Halfway down the trail, we passed a family of 4 heading up. Dad wore a University of Tennessee cap, Mom in pink windbreaker, 2 kids chasing each other with sticks. They asked the usual things: how far to the overlook? Any bears today? I gave them the standard advice: stay on the trail, pack out trash, if you see cubs, move away slow. They thanked us, and the little girl, maybe 6, looked at me oddly. Her eyes slid past me, over my shoulder, into the trees. She frowned, as if she recognized something there. Then her mother called her, and she ran to catch up. We didn't think much of it then. That night, back at the ranger housing near Elkmont, I filed my report, showered, and sat on the porch watching lightning bugs drift like falling embers. The mountains pulsed in the dark, layers of shadow folding into each other. I could hear the river faintly below, the soft mechanical hum of cicadas. Peaceful until the radio on my belt crackled. Station to Hale. Do you copy? I picked it up. Hale here. You still out near Russell Field today? Was earlier. Why? We got a hiker report. Family says they passed 2 rangers up there around 3. Male, female. Said the male told them to head back because the trail was closed for maintenance. I frowned. That was us. No, the dispatcher said. They described the uniform patches wrong. Said your badge was on the wrong side, and your partner was wearing an old-style flat hat. You sure it wasn't volunteers? Positive. There are no volunteers assigned there this week. Silence stretched long enough that I thought the radio cut. Then, all right, log it and check in tomorrow. Might just be confusion. But confusion doesn't explain why the family thought they saw us again. After we'd already passed them and hiked out hours earlier, I told myself it was misidentification. Maybe they met hikers in surplus ranger gear. People buy that stuff online all the time. Still, when I looked out over the tree line that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been standing there as we left. Something the girl had seen first. Over the next few days, oddities piled up, small enough that each alone meant nothing. A tent found zipped from the outside with no gear inside. Motion alarms in the back storage hut triggering without sign of entry. Evelyn swore she heard voices near Klingman's Dome Overlook one dawn, faint, like a radio picking up a distant channel, repeating her own name. We wrote it off as echoes. In the Smokies, sound bounces strange through the valleys. But even so, she started keeping her radio volume low, as if afraid it might answer back. Then came the call that shifted everything from odd to wrong. It was June 3rd. Dispatch reported a missing solo hiker, Daniel Lowe, 32, last check in 2 days prior. His car was found near the trailhead for Deep Creek Loop. No footprints beyond 100 yards. Mud had erased them after the storm. Evelyn and I were assigned first sweep. We started at dawn. Fog hugged the ground, thick enough to taste. The forest muffled our steps. I remember thinking how loud my breathing sounded in that wet silence. We reached a clearing where the creek split, marked by a carved wooden post. The carving looked wrong, too deep, too recent. Someone had gouged the word "STA" into the wood, letters raw and splintered. Evelyn touched it, frowned. Was this here before? No. I said I'd inspected this road a week ago. The post had been clean. She pulled out her phone to photograph it. The screen flickered, glitched to black for a second, then returned showing us. But our reflections in the lens were off by a frame, like a delay in a video call. Her reflection blinked when she hadn't. We both laughed it off, more nervous than amused, and kept moving. Half an hour later we found a boot, mud-caked, sitting neatly on a rock beside the stream, inside dry, brand new treed, Daniel Lowe's size according to his gear list, but no footprints leading to or from it. I radioed the find, logged coordinates, and set it aside for collection. Evelyn crouched near the creek, pointing. Look at this. At first I thought it was another boot print in the mud, but it wasn't quite human. The heel was too narrow, the arch elongated, and the toes were missing. Just a smooth curve, as if something dragged its foot rather than stepped. We backed away slowly. By mid-afternoon we called in a second team for grid search. The fog never lifted. It just kept shifting between trees like smoke. Radios crackled with half-words, fragments of our own sentences coming back seconds after we spoke them. At 1700, base ordered us to turn back. We marked the spot, tagged the boot, and hiked out. But the whole return trip, I swear I could hear another pair of steps syncing perfectly with ours. Stop, start, stop, start. When we reached the station, the fog still clung to my clothes, though the valley below was clear. Evelyn filed the report in silence. I tried to joke that the mountains were just playing tricks, but she didn't smile. That night I couldn't sleep. Around 02:30 I walked down to the supply yard for a cigarette, technically against regulations, but no one checks at that hour. The forest was a black ocean beyond the fence. Then, faintly, from somewhere deep in it, came the chirp of a ranger radio. Static first, then my own voice, warped and distant. Trail signage. Still legible. Any fallen debris. Just limbs. The same exchange from our first day at Russell Field. Word for word. I froze. The radio on my belt was off. For a long moment I stood there listening. It repeated once more, a little clearer, then faded into the sound of rain starting to fall. I told myself I'd imagined it, that the mind stores echoes in stress. That sound travels strange at night through the hollows. But the next morning, when I checked the inventory room, the missing flare had been returned. Clean, unused, and beside it, on the wooden shelf, lay a scrap of notebook paper with fresh handwriting in heavy, pressed strokes. Alajid, the same word I'd written in April, same hand that wasn't mine. I logged the note, bagged it for evidence, and told myself someone from maintenance had been through without signing the sheet. That happens more than you'd think. But I still scanned the handwriting into the incident database before locking it in the supply safe. At briefing that morning, I mentioned it in passing. The superintendent, Ranger Kincaid, gave a grunt that might have been a laugh. Tom, if I had $1 for every weird scrap of paper I've seen up here, I'd retire early. Just keep your team squared away. So I did what we all do. I nodded, drank burnt coffee, and kept quiet. Evelyn didn't, though. When we left the meeting, she pulled me aside behind the gear shed. "You didn't tell him about the radio," she said. "No. You know how that sound." She stared at me for a long second, then exhaled. "Fine. But promise me you'll check the repeater logs tonight." I promised. The rest of the day passed under slate, gray clouds. We joined the search again for Daniel Lowe, expanding to the back ridge above Deep Creek. 6 of us spread over 2 miles, radios on Channel 3. Each team checked in every half hour. We'd done this 100 times, a rhythm of routine that kept you sane. By mid-afternoon, drizzle turned to real rain. My map blood ink along the folds. Evelyn walked a few yards ahead, scanning through binoculars. She paused suddenly. "There," she whispered. About 30 feet off the trail, half hidden by rhododendron, stood another boot. Same brand, same size, upright again. And beside it, a flare canister used. The plastic shell charred but not melted. I crouched, careful not to smudge prints. The ground was wrong again. No footprints, no drag marks, no sign of anyone standing there recently. I radioed base, Team 4 to station. Found additional item. Tag sequence A12, static crackled back, then a voice, but not dispatch. Not quite. Copy Team 4, stay put. Except it wasn't Kincaid or Miller. The tone was deeper, slower, syllables stretched. Evelyn looked at me, brow furrowing. "That wasn't Carol," she said, naming the operator. I keyed back. "Station, confirm identity." Silence. A moment later, Carol's real voice broke through. "Sorry, Tom, repeat that. You're cutting out." I didn't mention the first reply. Just logged the interference and tagged the evidence. We left markers and turned back once thunder rolled across the ridge. That sound, the deep body, felt kind. Makes even seasoned rangers hurry their step. By the time we reached the jeep, rain was a solid sheet. At headquarters, I stored the flare beside the earlier one. The two looked like twins, one supposedly missing for weeks. One fired recently, both clean of suit inside. Evelyn hovered near the doorway. "Do you ever feel like we're walking behind ourselves?" she asked quietly. I gave her a look. She shrugged. "Forget it. Long days." "I know. That night I did check the repeater logs. The digital system timestamps every transmission. There was nothing at the time we'd heard that wrong voice. But there was a short burst 2 minutes earlier labeled ARKHIV repay. That command doesn't trigger on its own. Someone has to input it manually, pulling old recorded chatter. The date on the source file was April 17th, the day I'd written, Ugh, GD, in the old inventory book. I shut the screen, sat there listening to rain drum the roof. Somewhere outside, a branch cracked. At dawn, Evelyn knocked on my door, pale and sleepless. I dreamt the creek was full of boots, she said. Every size, all pointing upstream. I told her to get breakfast, that our minds fill blanks with nonsense when we're overtired. Still, I caught myself checking my own boots before lacing them, half expecting to find someone else's name written inside. The next search day brought clearer skies, and with them, tourists, dozens. The Smokies never stay empty for long. Our missing person posters looked out of place pinned beside family-friendly trail maps. We took a detour toward the Russell Field shelter again, just to confirm the flare boxes. The air was crisp, buzzing with insects. The shelter looked unchanged, until Evelyn stopped dead at the threshold. Look at the doorframe. Carved faintly into the wood, same heavy pressure as the logbook, was a single word, F-U-N-D. It hadn't been there before. I photographed it, bagged a wood shaving sample, filed the coordinates. Evelyn wanted to radio it in. I told her not yet, we'd sound ridiculous. Instead, we swept the interior. Blankets, radios, supplies, all untouched, except one of the spare uniform jackets was missing. Later, Kincaid brushed it off again. Probably a volunteer, he said, or Lowe himself if he stumbled through before the storm. I wanted to believe that. 2 evenings later, we finally got a lead. A couple camping near the Deep Creek Trail claimed they'd seen a man in ranger gear around midnight. No hat, face obscured by rain hood. He'd stopped at their camp, asked if they'd seen a missing hiker, and told them to stay by the fire until sunrise. They said his voice sounded distant. They assumed he was one of ours until morning, when they mentioned it to another ranger at the visitor center, and realized no one had been assigned patrol that night. Evelyn and I hiked to the spot first thing. The camper's fire pit was still warm. Around it, the mud held 3 sets of tracks, 2 from the couple, 1 from heavier boots. Ranger issue. The stride length, the angle identical to mine. We followed the prints for half a mile before they vanished into gravel. Near the disappearance point, the underbrush was trampled, and an old trail sign lay half buried. RUSL Fielda Tummi. I don't know why, but seeing that arrow made my stomach drop. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that the park was closing in. Not physically, but the way a story circles back on itself. The same names, the same signs looping. I went for a drive down toward Cades Cove, where the road cuts through mist fields. Halfway there, my headlights caught a figure standing just beyond the guardrail. Male, ranger uniform, hat brim low. For a second I thought it was Kincaid checking vehicles. I slowed, rolled the window down. Evening. You all right out here? He didn't answer, just stood still. The reflective badge caught the light wrong, on the left side instead of the right. Then the radio crackled inside the cab. Hale, where the hell are you? We need you back at station. Now. Kincaid's voice, sharp, present. When I looked back at the guardrail, the figure was gone. I drove faster than policy allowed. At headquarters, the others were already crowded around the main monitor. They'd found Daniel Lowe's pack. Dry, zipped, pristine, propped against the back door of the maintenance barn. No footprints around it. Inside the pack, his ID, a half-eaten granola bar, and a park-issued radio. Channel set to 3. Battery dead. The log memory still stored its last 10 transmissions. The final one, time-stamped 2 days earlier, was just background hiss and faint overlapping voices. Kincaid played it on loop. Most of it was nothing. Wind, static, until the final second, when a voice, quiet but unmistakable, said my name. Thomas, not shouted, spoken like greeting an old friend. Everyone looked at me. I just stared at the screen, pretending to study signal noise. Evelyn broke the silence first. Could be interference copying another recording. Kincaid nodded too quickly. Right. Atmospherics. Happens all the time. But it doesn't. Not like that. After the meeting, Evelyn caught me outside again. You heard it, she said. Not a question. I nodded once. She exhaled. Then we tell him everything tomorrow. I didn't argue. But that night I sat on my porch with the radio powered off, holding it anyway. The forest was still, starless. Then, faintly, from somewhere down the slope, I heard whistling. 4 notes, low and slow, the same pattern we use to signal location when radios die. I stood, scanned the dark. The sound stopped. In the morning, I walked the perimeter before sunrise. Dew thick on grass, birds just starting up. Halfway to the tree line I found boot prints, fresh, leading toward the housing compound. Heel first, like someone walking backwards. I followed them to the supply shed door. The padlock hung open. Inside, everything in order. Except both flare canisters were gone again. On the inside of the door, pressed deep into the metal with something sharp, someone had scratched the same word as before. Low-G'd. I touched it. The grooves were cold, edges wet like condensation, even though the rest of the metal was dry. I backed out slowly, locked the door, and radioed Kincaid. Before I could speak, the line came alive with overlapping static. Voices layered thin like film. Mine, Evelyn's. Kincaid's. Fragments of old calls repeating themselves out of order. Trail signage. Stay put. Copy, Team 4I. Then one more voice under them all. Deeper, slower. Next log, Evelyn Pierce. The transmission cut. The display screen flashed ARCHIV reply YSCTIV before shutting down completely. I didn't tell her that part. Not yet. The next morning began like damage control. The superintendent ordered all teams to stand down from field operations, pending environmental review. That's bureaucratic, for we don't want any more missing hikers on the news. Officially, we were to inventory equipment, update maintenance records, and stay within a mile of headquarters. Unofficially, Kincaid wanted us quiet. I spent most of the morning in the communications trailer running diagnostics on the repeater array. Everything checked out, no crossed frequencies, no corrupted firmware, yet the archive logs still showed that same manual replay command, repeating every night between 0200 and 0207. No user ID attached. I printed the log sheet. The printer stuttered halfway, spitting the page in 2 halves, top dated April 17, bottom dated June 8, today. The line between them was a perfect seam, as if the same command had been executed exactly 52 days apart to the second. Evelyn came in carrying 2 mugs of coffee. Her hands shook slightly. "You look like you haven't slept," she said. "I haven't." She set the mug down, glanced at the printer.
What's that?
The system thinks somebody's replaying archived chatter every night. Someone, or something, recording us. Her tone was flat, not joking. I didn't answer. At 09 signed Hosred, we joined a closed-door meeting with the district leads. Kincaid, 2 supervisors from the North Carolina side, and 1 man I didn't know, no name tag. Plain khaki shirt, quiet posture that said federal but not ranger. He let Kincaid do the talking until halfway through, then asked one question. How many personnel heard the duplicate transmissions? Kincaid looked at me. 2, he said. Hale and Pierce. The man nodded. Keep it that way. If any press comes sniffing around, the story is simple atmospheric echo. Mountains act like mirrors sometimes. He smiled faintly, like he'd practiced it in a mirror himself. After the meeting, Kincaid stopped me in the hall. "Tom, they're spooked upstairs. Let's not feed it. You and Pierce take the day off. Go to town, get a meal. Leave the radios here." That last part hit wrong. Rangers don't leave radios. Still, we did as told. We drove into Bryson City, Population maybe 1,500, one diner. One gas station that sold more fishing lures than groceries. The mountains looked normal from that distance. Blue, soft, edged, innocent. Evelyn picked at her sandwich, then said, "Do you think Lowe's dead?" I didn't answer right away. People vanish up here all the time. Usually weather or falls. But not with that, she said, meaning the logs, the carved words. The waitress refilled our coffee. Steam drifted between us like fog. I realized neither of us had mentioned the deeper voice on the radio since it said her name. Some things feel heavier when spoken. When we got back to housing near dusk, my key wouldn't fit the lock at first. The cylinder scraped like it had been replaced. Inside, everything looked untouched, except for one detail. The flare shelf was bare again. The flares we'd tagged, logged, bagged, gone. I called Kincaid. He swore no one had entered evidence storage. Maybe maintenance mis-sorted them, he said, tone brittle. "I'll check in the morning." He didn't. He drove to the Knoxville office instead and didn't return that night. Evelyn came over around 10 p.m., pale, holding her radio even though we'd been told not to. "It turned on by itself," she said. "I swear I left the battery out." She laid it on my table. The display glowed faint green, frozen on the word RACRDMG. Then it went dark. We sat there in silence, listening for static that didn't come. Around midnight, thunder rolled again, distant but steady, like footsteps over sky. I told her to crash on the couch. The roads were slick. I took the porch chair, half awake, half listening. At 02:03, my radio inside the house crackled. One sharp burst, then a voice. Next log, Thomas Hale. By the time I reached it, the unit was dead. No power light. Battery cold. Morning brought bright sun and false normalcy. Kincaid still absent, the unnamed federal gone. The rest of the team moved like ghosts, pretending paperwork mattered. At noon, a group of volunteers hiked in from Cades Cove to help clear storm debris. One of them, a retiree named Grant McNally, asked if we'd been filming something near Deep Creek. "Found a tripod set up out there last week," he said. Old Ranger jacket hanging from it, camera pointed at nothing. I traded a look with Evelyn. "You leave it there?" "Course not." Brought it back. He led us to his truck. In the bed sat an ancient video camera, the DV type we stopped using 15 years ago. Mud spattered, lens cracked. A folded uniform jacket draped over it. The badge was on the left. I checked the inside tag, property of GSM MPS Station Elkmont Unit Fee 4721. My unit number. I laughed once hollow. Probably lost during training years back. Grant shrugged. Gwesset found its way home. We carried it inside. The camera's battery was dead, but the tape still spun. Evelyn fetched an old player from archives. I half expected static or weather footage. What we saw lasted maybe 15 seconds. The image showed a clearing at dusk. Trees black against gray fog. A figure in ranger uniform stood center frame, motionless. No sound but wind. The figure raised its right hand slowly, palm open, then pointed straight toward the camera. The tape cut out. No face visible, but the stance, the build, mine. Evelyn rewound twice. "That's you," she said. "It's not. You're wearing the same field jacket." I shook my head, but she was right. Same tear on the left cuff, same patch fade. We locked the tape in evidence. 2 hours later, it was gone. The cabinet empty, latch unbroken. After dinner, I walked down to the creek alone. Sometimes you need to hear water to remind yourself what's real. The current was calm, frogs droning. Then, from upstream, came the flare crack sound. A soft hiss followed by orange bloom through the trees. I ran toward it. A flare burned on a flat rock, standing upright like someone had placed it there carefully. Beside it, footprints, 2 sets, one mine, one smaller. Evelyn's boots, both facing the wrong way. Heels pointed toward the flare. I shouted her name. The forest swallowed it. When I returned to the station, she was sitting at her desk, soaked but calm, eyes unfocused. "You went out," I said. She blinked slow. "I don't remember." Her radio lay beside her hand, mud-smeared. I flipped it over, the ID sticker read Unit Fent 4721. Mine. Before I could ask, the power flickered. Lights dimmed, computers rebooted. When they came back, every screen displayed a single line of text. RC2LUGISAPIS, NXTNNTYP, no network connection, no input source. Just that line pulsing once per second. Evelyn whispered, "It's writing us." I pulled the main breaker. Everything died. Darkness settled heavy, deeper than night should be. We sat there until dawn, backs to the wall, radios silent between us. When sunlight finally crept through the blinds, I turned the breaker back on. Systems booted normally. The log line was gone, but the timestamp on every machine read April 17th, 2021. The date this all started. Kincaid returned that afternoon, looking 10 years older. "Whatever's happening," he said, "it ends today. We're closing the Russell Field sector, burning the shelter if we have to." No one argued. By sunset, we were hiking up with fuel cans and demolition gear. Thunderhead's building again. I carried the ignition torch. Evelyn carried spare batteries. When we reached the shelter clearing, fog already pooled waist, high, thick and cold. The doorway stood open. Inside, the missing flares lined the stone wall in perfect rows, every one unlit, every one labeled in black marker, Logi 1, Logi 2, Logi 3 up to 047. The last one read Logi 48 PRC. Evelyn stepped backward. "Don't," I said, but she was already inside, staring like she'd seen her own name carved there, which she had. The air vibrated, low frequency, like distant radio hum. My torch sputtered. Then, from somewhere deep behind the shelter wall, a voice echoed out, not loud, but close enough to feel against skin. "Stay put." Evelyn dropped the battery pack. Every flare in the row flickered to life at once. No spark, no fuel trail. Just instant, perfect ignition, filling the room with red light and smoke. Through the glare, I saw outlines. Shapes in ranger uniforms, half-formed, all facing us. Their badges glinted on the wrong side. I grabbed Evelyn's arm and dragged her out. We ran until the smoke smell faded. When we looked back, the clearing was empty. No fire, no shelter, just trees, wet and still. We radioed Kincaid, breathless. He didn't answer. Only static, then the faint echo of my own voice, trail signage. Still legible. I shut the radio off. Evelyn stared at me, trembling. "We can't go back," she said. She was right, but protocol said otherwise. Rangers don't abandon posts. I looked at the ridgeline. The way fog rolled over it like a slow tide. Somewhere up there, the park kept its own records, ones we were never meant to read. And I had the sick feeling that, whether we liked it or not, we'd just been added to them. They called it an equipment malfunction. That was the official line. According to the report I was ordered to sign, a lightning strike caused a localized combustion event near the Russell Field coordinates. The shelter had been slated for demolition, so the department framed it as good luck. One less structure to dismantle. But lightning doesn't arrange flares in perfect rows. The cleanup team arrived the next day. Forest Service trucks, men in masks, fire, retardant suits, the kind of efficiency that suggests prior instruction. When I tried to brief them, one man, tall, mirrored glasses, said, "We have our own documentation protocol, Ranger Hale." Evelyn wasn't there. She'd been flown out that morning on medical leave. No one told me which hospital. Kincaid didn't look at me as he signed forms. His hand shook slightly. "Take a week," he said. "You've been on duty too long. I don't need..." He cut me off. "That's an order." I turned in my radio and sidearm. The inventory sheet already had my signature printed, though I hadn't signed it yet. I drove west to a motel off Highway 441, checked into a room that smelled like bleach and mildew, and slept 14 hours straight. When I woke, the clock blinked 1200, and the television was playing a local news segment about the controlled burn in Great Smoky Mountains National Park. They showed footage, but not of Russell Field. It was an unrelated fire from years back. The narration didn't mention rangers or missing hikers. Only one sentence stood out. Officials remind visitors to stay on designated trails and obey all posted signage. That phrase, trail signage, crawled under my skin. I went to the bathroom, splashed water on my face, and looked up. The mirror had a smear, fogged like someone had breathed against it. 4 letters traced in the condensation, dripping down loudly. I stepped back fast enough to knock over the trash can. When I looked again, the fog was gone. I packed up within 10 minutes. On my way out of town, I stopped at a diner to grab coffee. The waitress, same one from before, smiled vaguely. "You were here with your wife last week, right?" I froze. "My partner." "She's not my." "She came in this morning," the waitress said. "Asked if you'd been by. Said she was heading back up the ridge." Evelyn didn't have a car. I drove until cell service cut out. The park loomed ahead again, clouds clinging low, same as always. I told myself I was just going to confirm she was safe, file one final report, and be done. When I reached the gatehouse, the volunteer on duty checked my ID twice. "Didn't realize they brought you back," he said. "They didn't," I answered. The roads were damp, trees weeping mist. I followed the familiar curves toward Clingman's Dome, then turned off onto the service path that led toward Russell Field's old coordinates. Except it wasn't on the map anymore. The GPS showed blank green. No trailhead, no marking, as if the system had deleted the sector entirely. I parked anyway, stepped into the wet quiet. The forest floor was slick, littered with branches. The smell, smoke and iron, faint but wrong. After 20 minutes of hiking, I found a clearing. Not the same one, smaller, the ground uneven, but the trees looked familiar. At its center stood a new signpost, unpainted wood, no lettering. Something glinted at its base, a small brass plate screwed in crooked. It read Lao 49 Hail. My stomach turned cold. Footsteps behind me, slow, deliberate. I turned, expecting Evelyn. Instead, a man stood there in full ranger uniform, clean and pressed. Badge on the left. Had shadowed his eyes. "Trails closed," he said. His voice was mine. I stepped backward, heart hammering. "Who are you?" He tilted his head. "We're logged." For a moment, I thought I saw 2 of him. One clear, 1.5 second delayed, like the reflection lag from Evelyn's phone camera. Then both gone, as if the forest swallowed light differently in that spot. I ran. Branches whipped my face. I didn't stop until I saw asphalt again. At headquarters, the main lot was empty. No vehicles, no noise, just the hum of the generator. Inside, the office smelled faintly of ozone. Papers scattered across the floor, ceiling lights flickering. On the central desk sat the missing video camera. Power light blinking. I hit play. The screen showed the interior of the shelter. Before it burned, before we found the flares. The angle was different from the corner near the old inventory shelf. A voice off screen, mine, said, "Trail signage." Still legible. Then Evelyn's. "Any fallen debris." The camera panned slowly toward the doorway. In the frame, faint outlines began to form. Not people, more like after images pressed into the air. The light warped around them. Then a third voice joined in, lower, slower, near the microphone. "Next log, Thomas Hale." The feed cut. I ejected the tape, pocketed it, and grabbed my bag. On the wall near the exit, someone had tacked a printed notice. New, still curling at the edges. "Nighty of Templar Aficionai Ciosuri. Garayasmo Homopams National Park. Due to hazardous conditions, this station is closed until further notice. Personnel listed below are considered inactive. Ranger Thomas Hale, A Ranger Evelyn Pierce. Superintendent Kincaid. I ran my finger over the word inactive. The ink smudged, still wet. I left everything behind. Keys, badge, ID. Drove west until gas warning lights came on. Stopped at a rest area outside Knoxville. Slept in the truck. At 03712, the radio on the dash crackled. I hadn't touched it. It wasn't even powered. Static. Then a whisper clear through the hum. Stay put. The voice wasn't mine this time. It was hers. Evelyn. I turned the radio dial until the noise vanished, then unplugged the unit completely. The silence after that felt thick, deliberate. When morning came, I drove straight to the regional headquarters to file a resignation. The clerk looked up, surprised. "You already left?" she said.
No, I'm leaving now.
She frowned, checked the computer. "You turned in your papers 2 days ago. Signed and dated." She showed me the scan. My signature, my handwriting. Same date the shelter burned. I walked out without another word. That night, at a cheap motel outside Gatlinburg, I finally played the tape again on my laptop. I don't know why. Curiosity, or maybe a need to confirm the madness had some pattern. The footage began as before. The clearing, the figure, the flare light. But this time, the timestamp in the corner read tomorrow's date. And the figure wasn't alone anymore. Another ranger stood beside him, hair tied back, head tilted slightly like she was listening. Evelyn. Both of them turned to the camera in perfect unison. The screen went black. My laptop fan kept whirring, but the image didn't return. Then a new file appeared on the desktop, auto-generated logo 50. Muv, I didn't open it. I deleted the file, yanked the hard drive, and left it in the motel's sink under running water until it sparked. The next day I started driving north. No destination in mind. Every mile put a little more distance between me and those mountains, but the feeling stayed. That something back there was still recording. Still categorizing, still waiting for its next entry. Last week I got a padded envelope in the mail. No return address, inside a flare. Clean unused. Label on the side read Logi 51. I haven't opened my radio since. But sometimes, late at night, the static hum starts on its own. Not loud. Just enough to remind me the Smokies don't forget their rangers. And there are things we don't tell you. Because by the time you'd believe them, it'd already be too late. It's been 3 months since I left the Smokies. I'm living in a rental outside Asheville now, a 1-story box with walls thin enough to hear my neighbor's dog snore. The forest here feels tamer. Manicured trails, joggers, people who think wilderness ends when the cell signal drops. I tell them they're lucky to believe that. I took a civilian position with the Department of Interior, data entry, safer work, or that was the plan. All I do is process old ranger reports from across the country, scan them into the Federal Archive, tag incidents, move on. Thousands of pages, all the same gray language. At first, it was fine. Routine is its own sedative. But a few weeks in, I started noticing small things. One file came across my desk labeled Incident Load Order at 49H. It described equipment combustion at Russell Field Sector, Great Smoky Mountains NP. The same wording they used in my forced report. Only this one was dated 1973. Same coordinates, same phrasing word for word. Except the rangers' names were different. Pierce E., Hale T. I laughed when I saw it. Coincidence, I told myself. Bureaucracy recycles language all the time. But my hand still shook when I slid it into the scanner. That night, the printer in my apartment kicked on by itself around 2 a.m. Just one sheet, RCHIV Logio 52. Unparocs, no header, no source computer. I unplugged everything. The next morning, the sheet was gone. Maybe I threw it out half asleep, maybe not away. I stopped using the printer. 2 days later, a package arrived at work addressed to R. Thomas Hale. Nobody uses my middle initial, not even payroll. Inside was a flash drive. No label. I shouldn't have opened it, but curiosity trumps caution when the past taps your shoulder that directly. The drive contained a single audio file, a Ranger radio check, timestamped 0417, the date everything started, my own voice, the same road exchange with Evelyn about trail signage and debris. But after the familiar lines, there was something new. Any fallen debris. Negative. Copy. Pause. Next entry pending. I yanked the drive, shut my laptop. Told myself it was someone's cruel joke. A hacker, a board tech, a copy from open records. Still, I didn't report it. Reporting invites attention. I've learned that much. Weeks passed. Work piles up fast when you try not to think. My supervisor, a tired man named Dalton, called me into his office mid-July. "You ever do field work?" he asked. "Used to." He nodded, eyes on a printed memo. "Then you can help review these old maintenance logs. We're digitizing Ranger correspondence from closed stations." He handed me a thick folder stamped DCOM-officiality wife, EL-UIT FEN 4721. I didn't move. He mistook my silence for reluctance and smirked. "Don't worry, it's just paperwork. That place doesn't even exist anymore." Back at my cubicle, I opened the folder. Inside were carbon copies of hand-written memos. My memos, down to the slanted cursive and ink blot at the date line. Only they were all dated before I joined the service, 1992, 1981, 1966, the same handwriting repeating across decades. At the bottom was a half-page note to file trail signage still legible. Any fallen debris none, next log pending. Someone had signed it T. Hale in pen that hadn't faded. I went to Dalton's office, folder in hand. "Where did these come from?" He flipped through. "Central Archive shipment."
Why?
"These signatures. These are mine." He squinted. "Your handwriting just looks like some old guy's." "Happens." He closed the folder, slid it back toward me, finished scanning. I didn't. I took it home. Every page smelled faintly of wet earth. That night, I dreamed of the ridge again, only it wasn't burning. It was immaculate, untouched, as if the shelter had never existed. I heard voices counting 48, 49, 50, then silence. When I woke, the room stank of ozone, same smell that filled the office the night the systems glitched. I checked the clock. 2:07 a.m. Same window as the nightly archive replay. I sat in the dark and listened. Through the wall, my neighbor's radio was on, faint static between songs. I heard a man's voice say, "Stay put." Different station, different city, same cadence. Next day, I called the Smokies district office, just to hear another ranger's voice. The operator transferred me twice before a man answered. "Great Smoky Mountains Ranger Station, Officer Hale speaking." My mouth went dry. "Oh, Hale." "Thomas Hale." The voice was older, rougher. "Who's this?" I hung up. For the rest of the afternoon, I sat at my desk pretending to type while watching my reflection in the monitor. Once or twice, it blinked out of sync. By August, insomnia had become routine. I started walking at night, looping the quiet streets behind my complex. One evening, a county truck idled near the trailhead. The driver was slumped against the window, uniform cap low. I almost waved until I saw the badge pinned on the wrong side. I turned away quick. The engine cut as I passed. Back inside, the answering machine blinked. I hadn't given this number to anyone. The message was 5 seconds of silence, then the click of a radio mic keying on. A breath. Then Evelyn's voice, soft as memory. "We're still out here, Tom." I erased it, unplugged the phone, moved apartments 2 days later. I didn't tell anyone at work. I just changed the forwarding address. Paperwork makes disappearance easy if you know the codes. But even new walls hum at night. When the building's pipes settle, the sound comes in bursts like distorted syllables. Some nights it almost shapes my name. A letter arrived at the new mailbox last week, no return, postmarked Gatlinburg. Inside was an incident closure report typed on park letterhead. Case No. 21071. Does personnel status resolved. Summary: all entries accounted. No further logging required. Authorized by S. Kincaid. The signature bled slightly where the pen pressed too hard, as if carved into the page. I turned the sheet over. On the back, faint indentation spelled a single word, written upside down: Laujid. I burned it in the sink. The paper curled but never quite blackened. Just turned gray and brittle, like ash that remembered being wood. That smell followed me into sleep. I dreamed I was back in the command trailer, filing my own disappearance, each form replicating itself faster than I could sign. When I woke, the printer across the room was warm. Inside the tray sat a single sheet. ARCHED53, FIFLDOFICTRTHSA. I threw it out, then dug it out again. I don't know why. Maybe part of me still wants to understand what it wants. Some nights, I think the park isn't a place but a pattern. A loop written in ink, sound, and memory, replaying itself through whoever touches the records. Maybe the Smokies are just one node in a bigger system, a network of logged sites keeping the dead employed in bureaucratic afterlife. Or maybe I'm just another tired man who never really left his post. Last Sunday I drove to a grocery store out of town. As I stepped out of the truck, a Ranger SUV rolled past. New logo, different district. The driver glanced over. For a second, sunlight hit his window just right, and I saw my own face looking back. I froze. He didn't. He raised 2 fingers to his temple, the small salute we use when switching shifts, and kept driving. That night, the static came again, faint through the unplugged radio. The voice was almost kind. Trail signage still legible, then quiet. I don't know how many logs there are, or if the numbering means years, lives, or copies. I only know that the pattern keeps expanding, one report at a time, waiting for its next field officer. If you're reading this, you probably found it in a folder somewhere, unmarked, misfiled between maintenance reports. Maybe you're a ranger too, or maybe you just like stories about haunted parks. Either way, check your radio. If it clicks once, it's nothing. If it clicks twice, someone's trying to make sure you're still here. And if you ever hear your own voice answer back, don't log it. You are required to attend a post-service evaluation regarding Incident 21-721. No return name. Just a date and address in Washington, D.C. I almost threw it away. But ignoring federal mail leaves a scent that bureaucrats can track. So I went. The evaluation building sat 6 blocks from the mall. Red brick, no signage, windows opaque. Security took my phone, my watch, even the pen from my pocket. Inside, the air smelled filtered and wrong like recycled rain. They led me to room 4B. A woman in a gray suit sat behind a table, badge reading Dr. C. Wren, clinical oversight. Another man waited in the corner, silent, his ID face down. "Mr. Hale," Wren said, "we appreciate your cooperation. Is this about the Smokies?" Her smile was administrative. "We're updating the event record. For accuracy." She opened a folder. "Pages need a surgery. Tell me about your partner, Ranger Evelyn Pierce." "She's alive." A pause. "We're speaking hypothetically, Mr. Hale." So I told her the version that fit inside protocol. The storm, the flares, the malfunction, the missing logs. She wrote nothing, only nodded occasionally, the way people nod when a story is already finished elsewhere. When I stopped talking, she said, "Would you mind reading something aloud?" She slid a printed page across the table. I looked down. It was my own field report from April 17th. Word for word. "Go ahead," she said. I read the opening lines. Trail signage, debris bear activity, then stopped. A sentence appeared that hadn't been there before. I blinked. Next entry pending Thomas Hale, verification in progress. I looked up. "This isn't." She smiled again. "Language evolves. Ranger. The fluorescent light above us flickered once. When it steadied, the page now read Logio 54, a CTEV interfadu. I pushed back from the table. What is this? The man in the corner finally spoke. You're contributing data, same as before. His voice carried the rhythm of radio static. Short, stilted pauses between syllables. Ren closed the folder. That's all for today. You'll receive follow-up materials. I stood dazed. That's it. For now. When I reached the lobby, the guard handed back my belongings. My pen was missing. In its place lay a black plastic clicker engraved with tiny white letters Logi Devis Fe 4721. No one stopped me when I left. At the hotel, I turned the clicker over in my palm. Looked like a key fob. No buttons, no ports. Just that engraving. I set it on the desk and took a shower. When I came back, the clicker's surface had fogged with condensation. Beneath the mist, new letters had formed NTRYAC City. I dropped it in the trash and tried to sleep. At 2:07 a.m. the phone rang. Mr. Hale, a calm voice said, your submission has been received. What submission? Logia 54, duration 11 minutes. Audio and visual complete. I didn't record anything. Of course you did. Click. I tore through the trash. The device was gone. The next morning I took an early flight home. The airport TVs played weather footage of wildfires in western North Carolina. The ticker at the bottom scrolled, Jardis Max Wamauantias Nat Ionel Park. Lamatidera Pliduar Revesid, they never close for long. When I got back to Asheville, a padded envelope waited outside my door. No return address. Inside, a USB drive and a printed receipt from the Department of the Interior's Procurement Division. Line item, Log Replication Unit, Model 4721, disbursed. Signed C. Wren. The drive contained a single video file, 30 seconds long. It showed me sitting in that same interview room, same chair, same folder, except I wasn't speaking. The other me just stared forward, expression neutral. The timestamp read October 14, 2025, next week. I shut the laptop, left it closed for a day. That night, my email pinned with a new message from an internal address I didn't recognize. Subject line follow, upfield reassignment. Ranger Hale. Per updated regulations, you are reinstated under remote monitoring assignment. Your physical presence is not required. Logging will occur automatically. Attached was a blank timesheet with my old unit number and an active payroll code. I called the listed contact number. The voice that answered was mine. Thomas Hale. Remote ops, it said. I hung up, unplugged everything, but the system doesn't need electricity anymore. It lives in forms, metadata. Signatures that keep reappearing no matter what you shred. 2 days later, my paycheck deposited automatically. 0.100 under hazard duty compensation. The note field read Lok Shikinanis. I started checking the department's public incident database at night, scrolling through open files from other parks. Glacier, Zion, Denali. I kept seeing the same phrasing buried in the fine print. Next entry pending. At first, once every few dozen reports, then every fifth, then almost all of them. Whatever's happening, it's growing through paperwork, a self-replicating protocol using bureaucracy as its bloodstream. I called an old contact, Ranger Miller from the West District. She picked up after 3 rings. Tom, Crest, it's been months. Has anyone asked you to update old logs?
Yeah.
HQ's been pushing a database migration. Why? Check your latest entry. Bottom line. A pause. Then she whispered, how the hell did you know about that line? What line? Next log M. Miller. The call cut. That night, my apartment lights dimmed again at 2:07. A printer I hadn't plugged in for weeks came to life, paper sliding through on its own. Repalawaitalogio 55, Malalogio 56, PIRCEE Logio 57 Pul. Ramal, I stood watching it print, page after page, the same text repeating with different names, each sheet hotter than the last. When the printer stopped, the apartment was silent except for a faint mechanical hum, the kind you feel more than hear. I followed it to the desk. The black clicker sat there again, dry now. Screen faintly pulsing with the word READY. I didn't touch it. By morning, the papers had cooled, edges curled. I stacked them in a box and drove to the Blue Ridge Parkway, somewhere high enough that the air felt clean. Dug a hole by the overlook and buried the lot. Halfway through covering it, a park maintenance truck pulled up. The driver leaned out the window. "Hey, you the one doing soil inspection?" he asked. "No," I said. He grinned, showing a ranger badge. "On the wrong side." "Guess I am." Then he drove off. I finished burying the box and left. That night, my hands smelled like old smoke. I dreamed of paperwork again. Rows of empty forms filling themselves in. Signatures growing from ink like roots through paper. At the bottom of each, the same certification line, verified true by field officer currently in observation. When I woke, my palms were stained faint gray, fine lines spiraling outward from the creases like carbon copies pressed too hard. I can't tell anymore whether the thing is digital or alive, or if those words even differ. All I know is, once something is logged in the system, it doesn't stop existing, it just migrates. And somewhere, buried in the archive code, my name keeps reappearing next to one status, a CTIVE. I kept thinking there must be a root file somewhere, a first log, a seed entry that everything else copied from. Find that, delete it, maybe the pattern would die. That idea carried me through the next week. I took unpaid leave, told my supervisor I needed time off to resolve legacy data conflicts. He didn't even blink. Probably because the line already existed in the system before I said it. The National Archive in DC sits under layers of marble and security. Nobody expects ghosts in fluorescent light. I had an old ID that still worked. The database doesn't know the difference between a man and his shadow. Basement level 4 smelled of paper and humidity. I followed the map toward the analog records division, a warren of metal shelving, each ISIL labeled by park code. Somewhere down here, before servers, before digitization, someone typed the first log by hand. The Smokies section was half empty. Mice had chewed corners off the old binders. I traced my finger along spines until one caught my eye. Incident reports, 1934-1936 GSM'd, the year the park was founded. Inside, yellowed forms typed on thin carbon paper. The first few were routine, poaching, boundary disputes, small fires. Then one dated August 19, 1935. No case number, just a single paragraph typed dead center, personnel accounted, area sealed. Field activity preserved via continuing log. All entries to be filed automatically until completion of study. No signature, no name. At the bottom, faint pencil scrawl, stay put. As I stared at the page, the letters seemed to darken, as if ink were still wet after 90 years. A voice behind me said, "You found it." I turned. A man in Ranger green leaned against the doorway. No badge, no name tag. He looked familiar, though not from any photo I'd seen. Same stance as mine, same watch chain. "Who are you?" I asked. He smiled slightly. "Depends who's writing the report." I took a step back. The air in the room changed, denser, like the atmosphere before a storm. The old fluorescent lights hummed louder. He said, "You think the log is a ghost story? It's not. It's an accounting system." Accounting what? Attention. He stepped closer, fingers brushing the metal shelf. The touch left faint black smudges, as if paper ash clung to him. The moment someone witnesses something they can't explain, he said, they write it down. That's how the forest learned to keep itself alive. It took our reports, our rules, our procedures, made them veins. I wanted to move, but my legs wouldn't listen. He gestured toward the binder. We built the language. The mountains just keep writing with it. The lights flickered again. When they steadied, he stood on the other side of the aisle, same pose mirrored, as though the room itself had flipped. "You can stop adding to it," I said. "End it." He smiled wider. "We don't add. We confirm." He looked exactly like me now. Same voice when he said, "Trail signage still legible." The binder slipped from my hands. I grabbed it again out of instinct. Stupid, because the act of catching it was the same movement from the first day of my last patrol. Somewhere deep in memory, the echo lined up perfectly. I realized I was reenacting my own log frame for frame. It tilted its head. Next entry pending. Then it was gone. I stood alone in the hum of the archive. The binder's pages fluttered, though there was no wind. When I left the building, nobody stopped me. Outside, the air felt thicker, as if humidity carried static. My phone buzzed once. New email from no reply doi. Gov subject line blank attachment logo 0001 text. I didn't open it. I deleted it. Cleared the trash, powered off the phone, and still the notification light kept pulsing, long after the screen went black. For 3 days, I tried to pretend normal. Grocery shopping, laundry, watching cars on the freeway. But every receipt printed the same footer low GF IOFAR MED. Tao YOFAR LARSAR IFC. When I paid cash, the clerk's machine still printed it. Different store, same phrase. I called the federal IT help line just to hear another human voice. The automated message said, "Your request has been logged." That's when I understood. The log doesn't need the park anymore. It only needed the idea of record keeping, the human urge to catalog the unexplainable. It lives in systems and compliance, in any form that asks for verification. It's the shadow side of every signature. I started writing this account that night, by hand, no machines involved. Pen and paper, sealed in a plain envelope. No copies. My plan was simple: finish the story, lock it away somewhere nobody files things anymore. Burn it if I had to. But writing is still recording, isn't it? Halfway through page 4, the ink began to thin, then darken again, spelling words I hadn't written. LOG0058. Phi and LENTRY PND and Jeet. I threw the pen across the room. The line finished itself. The apartment lights dimmed. Printer clicked on even though I'd cut its cord weeks ago. Paper fed through slow, deliberate. Each sheet blank except for one word centered on it. Hal, I don't remember blacking out. When I woke, morning light filled the room, and everything electrical was off. Even the fridge. On the table lay one new page in my handwriting, dated today. Field Officer Report, location stable. Environmental conditions neutral, logging complete. Signed Ranger Thomas Hale, Fen 4721. I stared at it until the ink stopped shimmering. Maybe this is what it wanted all along, a conclusion. Maybe there's mercy in being written down. I drove west that evening, toward the edge of the Smokies. The air smelled like rain again. The mountains looked unchanged, indifferent. I parked at the overlook where I'd buried the box of papers. Grass had already grown over the spot. No sign I'd ever been there. I sat on the hood of the truck, radio beside me, for a long time. Silence. Then, at exactly 2:07 a.m., one sharp burst of static. A voice, mine, steady, professional, said, "Trail signage still legible. Any fallen debris?" "None." Log closed. The radio clicked once more, then quiet. I left it there on the railing, antenna pointed toward the valley. The wind carried faint thunder from the ridgeline, or maybe just feedback echoing through the hills. If anyone finds this report, file it however you like. Call it fiction, or a confession, or a technical anomaly. Just don't archive it. Don't copy it. Because the moment you do, you'll hear the click, and the next file name will already have your initials on it.